Welcome to our Concept 5 lesson on how do humans impact erosion. So we've spent a lot of time looking at weathering and erosion in those natural processes. Today we're going to take a look at how humans have an effect on erosion. You should write the essential question, how do humans impact erosion, on the top of page 80 in your notebook. And today, when you take your notes from this lesson, you can take your notes just by copying down information from the slides, putting it into your own words, or if you'd prefer, you can do sketch notes. So you can choose the note-taking strategy that you like the best for taking your notes today on page 80 in your notebook. So let's go ahead and get started and look at how humans impact erosion. First of all, the human impact on our planet with regards to erosion is huge. In fact, it's been calculated that human activity causes 10 times more erosion than all of the natural forces that we've just finished talking about in our previous lessons combined. That means adding together the flow of fresh water, waves, wind, gravity, glaciers, people still cause 10 times more erosion than all of those put together. So we're really creating a huge problem on our planet. In fact, humans are stripping soil from the earth faster than nature can replace it. Normally, the erosion and deposition processes, the force of erosion and then the creating of new soil and the deposition of that new soil in a location is balanced out. But because of the way that we are stripping soil off the land, it's not being able to be replaced at the same rate that it is formed. And if you recall, we said that soil is a non-renewable resource, and this is why. We are taking away soil and destroying it faster than it can be replaced. And that is what's making it be a non-renewable resource. So let's look at some of the ways that we as humans cause this erosion. And there are lots of different things that we do that impact erosion on our planet. The first one probably is really obvious, and that's deforestation and clear cutting. Deforestation and clear cutting is when people go into an area where there had previously been trees, a forest, a large wooded area, and remove all the trees. They just chop them all down. Now, sometimes it's because they're going to develop the area, but sometimes they chop down all the trees, maybe for lumber, and don't replant. Or if they put in a road, then beside the road is still devoid of trees where there had been trees before. So as those trees and vegetation are removed, the erosion increases. And that's because the tree roots are no longer there to hold down the soil. It has been estimated that if we continue to deforest the Amazon rainforest regions, in 100 years there will be no more tropical rainforests. So you can see that we're really cutting down trees at a remarkable rate, and that's not a good remarkable rate. Another way that we can impact and add to the problem of erosion is by draining wetlands. Wetlands are areas like marshes and swamps. This picture here is of the Everglades, which is in South Florida. Wetlands are really important because they help to control flooding. So when wetlands are drained, flooding increases. The town where I grew up, where my high school was and where the mall was, and they were pretty close to each other, had once been a wetland. The wetland was drained so that they could build the high school, build the mall, and do things like that. Because they drained the wetland, whenever it rained heavily, it would flood really badly. In fact, at my high school, when it rained hard for several days, or if there was just even one big downpour, there'd be so much rain in the hallways that you'd be wading in water to get to class. Now, all of our hallways were outside, so that was a little bit different than our schools here. But still, could you imagine having to walk through over ankle deep water to get to class? Trust me, it's not fun. Plus, the roads would also flood to the point where it wasn't safe to drive your car because the water was so high, you could have issues with getting water in your engine. So it was definitely a problem because of draining the wetlands. Because the wetlands are this wet, marshy environment, it's kind of like a sponge. If you think about a sponge, sponges can very easily absorb water and hold it in, and that's kind of what a wetland does. And so whenever there's a lot of precipitation, the wetland helps to hold in that water and reduce flooding. If we remove those wetland areas, then flooding increases in the areas around. Another way that we contribute to erosion is through poor farming practices, and we've talked about this already this year. One of the poor farming practices is called overgrazing, and this is when you have cows, sheep, goats, horses that are allowed to graze on land, and they eat and eat and eat the grass and the sod until there's nothing left. And so that contributes to erosion because now there's nothing holding the soil in place. Another one is over plowing and leaving fields with no covering. So if you continue to plow away all of the covering holding down the soil can very easily be blown away by wind, especially when there's a drought. And this very famously happened during the Dust Bowl. Farmers removed sod, and sod were these clumps of grassy stuff that was helping to hold in the soil in order to farm. And once the drought came, there was nothing to hold the topsoil in place. Basically, what happened is that it got very dry, and because it got very dry, the plants died. And so now the plants were their corn crops, whatever their crops might have been, were dying, and so they didn't have the roots to hold down the soil. As the soil dried out more and more and more, it of course got very easy to blow away whenever there was wind. The reason why the sod would have been able to hold down the soil is because that it was built for that environment and able to withstand the drought, whereas the crops that they planted were not able to do that. And this picture here shows what one of the dust storms looked like. And you can see it is insane how much soil there is in the air there, and that's all good topsoil that was blown away. And from the Great Plains area, some of that soil blew all the way to the Atlantic Ocean, and so obviously that soil is lost forever. One of our last ways that we really impact and add to erosion is by mining and development. We build a lot of new roads and houses around here, and practically everywhere you go, you can see a place where they are building and where they are cutting down trees in order to build a house, in order to build a new road. And that's a huge problem. While it's this huge construction site, there's nothing holding down that soil and sediment. Open pit mines especially contribute to erosion as well. All mining can add to the problem, but as you can see, these are these big, huge mines that are big holes in the land, and you can probably tell by that picture why it'd be so easy for erosion to happen in that area. So mining and development are another big way that we contribute to erosion. Now, we can also prevent erosion. We've already talked about most of these. So just to review, there's land reclamation. Remember, that's when, in that previous picture where that open pit mine is, where you would fill it back in so that the land is now usable and it's not just this big hole in the ground where lots of erosion can happen. Terracing, where you make those stair steps on a steep hill for farming. Contour plowing, that helps to reduce erosion by following the shape or contours of a hill. No-till farming, that leaves the stalks behind after you have harvested a crop in order to help hold down the soil throughout the non-growing season. Crop rotation, which helps to replace nutrients in the soil as you're not planting the same crop in a field year after year after year. Cover crops, which are also used to help replace nutrients in the soil. And then windbreaks, which are planting trees or putting fences or walls around the field in order to break the wind around the field. Some of the other things that we use are things called silt fences, and there's a picture here. And I'm sure now that you see this picture, you will have noticed these around town wherever they're building houses and roadways. And what this does is help to keep this silt, which is fine sediment, out of the groundwater supply, not getting into storm drains. Because this extra sediment, if it washes into the Chattahoochee River or Lake Lanier, can cause a lot of problems for fish and other aquatic life in there. So as you can see, humans are really a problem when it comes to erosion. We create more of a problem than any of the natural forces do. All right, last thing I need you to do is to finish a question starter from each of those categories below, a basic, an advanced, and a thinking about thinking, and be ready to talk about this in class. And we'll also be learning about a really crazy amount of erosion that was human caused that happened right here in Georgia in class, and I can't wait to share this with you. Thanks for joining me. Goodbye.